Hello, thank you for watching. We're in the kind of the final hours of the atmospheric river event that has come through California on the west coast this weekend. It's a historic event in many respects, chief of which would be rainfall. Just a tremendous amount of water falling on the state of California over the last 3 to 4 days. Literally trillions of gallons of rainfall across the state. This is just trying to capture some context here. This is the last 72 hours of rainfall recorded as of early this morning here on February 7th. This came out from the National Weather Service here this afternoon. To kind of give you some perspective as you get into the light blues, that's where we're talking about an inch of rainfall. So areas along the foothills of the Central Valley. Then you get beyond that, you get into kind of the pink color or the purple color. That's where you're getting over 2 inches. Beyond that, you get to the red, where we're talking 3 inches plus, which is a lot of rainfall for anywhere in California over a short amount of time. And we went well beyond that in many locations. You're talking an excess of 5 inches. You're getting into that orange color. You can see some areas of that in the Sierra Nevadas, some of that falling as snow rather than rain in Northern California. And then the extreme amounts. Some areas in Southern California, some of the mountainous regions in the northern Los Angeles County, Santa Barbara area, you're talking close to 10 inches of rainfall at the max. One area recorded 19 inches of rainfall over the past 72 hours. It's going to be hard to beat that in the future. Some of these record amounts from Southern California, you can see that bullseye right here. Flooding, obviously a huge concern this past weekend. There were a number of water rescues. We did see, obviously the conversation was focused on a lot of the precipitation, the snowfall at higher elevations, but a lot of damaging wind gusts had come through California. We saw wind advisories, high wind warnings, which is a level above that. Some extreme gusts, 100-mile-an-hour plus recorded up at higher elevations in the Sierra Nevadas, fortunately, where most people are not habitating. But nonetheless, a huge event. I mean, with almost all hazards that you can get out of an atmospheric river event, from wind to rain to snow, flooding, we saw them all in various parts of the state. One area that didn't quite get maybe as much rain as we expected going into the end of last week was the Central Valley. You can see some areas here hardly getting a quarter to a half inch of rainfall, where some areas got a bit more, an inch, or maybe just a little bit more than that as you go up into the Sacramento Valley. Higher values recorded there, but nonetheless, a very potent event, and we still have some rainfall coming through today. You could maybe even include that with the same event here that we saw this weekend. Jump over and look at snow totals. As you can imagine, very high in parts of the Sierra Nevadas and even extending elsewhere. Even Southern California, some of the southern ranges getting a tremendous amount of snowfall from this, where the some of the mountains have a higher elevation. Values recorded in the Sierra Nevadas, again, you get into some rare air here, literally and figuratively, 4 feet plus in some locations. We saw, of course, I-80 stopped at various times, chain controls, just a lot of snow. This is going to improve the snowpack situation kind of in the long term. In the near term, it was enough to cause traffic issues, some accidents, and various issues. So it's certainly a double-edged sword. The way the water situation works out in California, a lot of times, that can be the way it is. Outside Las Vegas, there was an avalanche. See some of the higher elevations there getting quite a bit of snowfall out of this as well. Fortunately, last I looked, no fatalities recorded with that one. Everyone seemed to make it out safely as of reports right now here on February 7th. A lot of snow here. We'll get a quick update on the snowpack situation. Big improvements. This was recorded as of yesterday. More snow expected today across the Sierra Nevadas. If I zoom in here, this was an area that was really struggling for snowpack in the Sierra Nevadas. We talked about this, I think, probably every week of 2024. We're still not back to average, but we're closer now at 78% for parts of the central and southern Sierras, just below that in the central and some other areas here. Improving the snowpack situation on the Sierras, as you'd imagine. How could we not, with all the snowfall we just talked about here this weekend? If you go east of that, look closely here at the Colorado River Basin. That's what a lot of these basins feed into here. They're running at average, that green coloring there on the legend, if not above it, in areas where you see some of those blues here. So more snow coming for some of these areas, I think, here tonight and tomorrow. I think the situation here has improved quite a bit here this winter. And, if the forecast holds, that we'll get into, at the end of this video, I think their situation could improve a little bit more. We'll wait to kind of discuss that until we get there. If we look across some of the northern western regions, so talking the northern Cascades, getting up into northern Idaho, parts of northwest Montana, the Rocky Mountains, some of these areas here not doing fantastic. The concern has almost shifted north a bit with all the focus, the rainfall, the snowfall on California. We talked about Nevada, outside Las Vegas, getting a lot of snowfall. You haven't had a lot to talk about up north, and that's starting, despite their kind of fast start, started to become something of an issue. The Yakima Valley here running below average now. The reservoir is not doing so great there compared to some other areas, say in California or over in the Snake River Valley, where the reservoirs are at or above average at this point here in 2024. If I take you to the map in early January, the same snowpack year-to-date average, not nearly as good of a map as we have now. So a ton of snowfall has come through the area. Even the Cascades, an area I was concerned about, has improved quite a bit, despite some lingering concerns in some of these northern areas. So despite some areas we're still looking at, we've improved in a big way in the year-to-date, for water year-to-date snowpack situation across the west region. I want to show you this picture here. This is from the Central Sierra Snow Lab near Donner Pass. They put the instrumentation up on this tower here. You can see some instrumentation here. You can see why they have it lifted so far off the ground, because they get so much snow here in the upper levels of the Sierra Nevadas, particularly in the Central Sierras. You can see it covering the trees here, getting up onto the shed. That you got to keep all that stuff off the ground for exactly this type of scenario. January, February, all the snow that they get in the Sierra Nevadas, their situation improving in the Central Sierras, and it's, you don't have to look at a graph. We don't have to look, at any data here. Obviously, a tremendous amount of snow here falling and has fallen across the Sierra Nevadas here just in the last 72 hours plus. And I say that, and I'm going to show you the actual graph, right? So the red line here is where we're at in the 23 to 24 water year. That blue line is the average accumulation. If you look closely, I'll zoom in, make this a little bit more visible. Scrolling past some of the statistics there. Here's our snow water equivalent at the Central Sierra Snow Lab, kind of using this as a proxy for the Sierra Nevadas in terms of their snowpack, although there is differences if you go further north or further to the south. But they have climbed much closer to average than we were at the beginning of January. You can see we were well down here, kind of off the percentiles entirely. We've climbed our way much closer to average at this point here at the kind of the start of February. We have more of this kind of peak year to go. And again, sort of giving you a hint or a spoiler for the forecast to come. I think early indications are we could be looking at another potentially heavy snowfall event well out into the forecast here. We'll see where trends go from there, and that would probably get us closer to average even further, if not reaching it, if we get some more big weekends in here. It's always kind of a tricky forecast when you think about a long-term forecast anywhere across the West, maybe at least compared to the rest of the eastern U.S. when you get across the divide. A wet season in the western U.S. could be dry for a big chunk of that, but you get a lot of the rain or a lot of the snowfall in a short period of time. Southern California, fantastic example. Some cities there getting nearly their entire yearly amount of rainfall in that 72-hour period in that map we just looked at. So would you call it a wet winter? Yes, when you average it up at the end of it, even though maybe the last 3 to 4 weeks in some of those locations may have been dry. It doesn't take, a few giant storms to make up for all of that in a big way. So that's something we always kind of keep an eye on, even though we're below average now, right? Some of these big storms can get pretty vertical on some of these charts for snowpack or rainfall. Jumping us up to present day here, we have another low pressure system to talk about. We can kind of include this one in some of the storms here we've seen recently. If you look closely, you can see this spinning up here just north of San Francisco. That's brought showers, even some thunder into the area for Central California. Some of these are pretty potent in terms of heavy rainfall. The caveat here is it's going to be more of a quick hitting system, so not kind of these training events or when they sequentially line up and just flood in one area. This is more of a kind of potent, fast hitting system. It'll be moving kind of southwest or northwest to southeast, I should say, across California here the rest of the day as we go through the day to day. And behind it, and you can almost kind of see this if you look closely at the low level cloud field here, bringing some of that colder air from the northwest. Some of these systems that come down northwest to southeast a little bit colder, that could bring in some cold weather concerns for the Central Valley. It's early February now. We're getting a little bit close to that blossom season where that'll become a little bit more challenging and relevant. Taking a look at the Central Valley rainfall here and then along the coast as well. Some of these heavy showers now moving in just south of San Francisco, the rain lightening up there around midday here. Central Valley seeing some heavy rain. We talked about this kind of the events that had come through this weekend. The rain that we got wasn't as biased toward the Central Valley. They're making up a little bit for that now with some heavy rain moving into the area. And then at elevation, getting another chance of snow here for the Sierra Nevadas. Now, again, more of a quick hitting system, not going to be the biggest amounts, but we're talking 6, 7, 8, maybe even a foot of snowfall in some of the Sierra Nevadas. Winter storm warnings are out for the southern Sierras with winter weather advisories for the central and northern Sierras. Nothing. I mean, it'll add up and help us get a little bit closer to average there in terms of that snowpack. If we take a look at the next 48 hours of snowfall, this is from the National Blend of Models, just giving you an update of what we're going to see from this quick hitting system. First impacting, like I just said, the Sierra Nevadas getting potentially a foot, maybe a little bit more in the southern Sierras here, improving the situation there. Some non-negligent, but not the biggest amount here in the Central Valley. This will be spinning up and then entering parts of Arizona, Utah, Colorado. This is kind of your textbook upper Colorado River basin here, so good to see them getting some more snowfall here, considering that the last year and the year before we were talking about Lake Powell right about here and Lake Mead running below average, if not near record lows. So improving the snowpack situation across here. This was something we were kind of hoping for going into this year, the 23-24 El Nino winter, of course, can be bountiful for California, but also areas east, parts of Arizona, Nevada snowfall, Utah, Colorado, even parts of Wyoming, all feeding into the Colorado River east of California. Give you some perspective here. This is the ECMWF. We'll look at the European model for the simulated precipitation, that forecast going forward. Make this valid here as of Wednesday evening, kind of near the recording of the video. See the center of that low here trying to spin up into the Central Valley of California. That's bringing that rain to the Sacramento Valley. Some lighter amounts now getting into the San Joaquin Valley with that snow upper in the upper elevations of the Sierra Nevadas. That'll be working through overnight tonight, late into Thursday night, looking closer to midnight now with some additional rainfall coming through Southern California. Not the heaviest amounts here. Not going to say this is going to bring about dramatic flooding threat right back to the area, but given that everything's so waterlogged from what we just saw this weekend, adding additional rain to that could be something of a challenge. It could get heavy at times. We're seeing that now along the Central Coast, seeing some heavy rain pushing into the Central Valley. But it's going to be a quick hitting system. So while it will be heavy for short periods tonight, it will be exiting out of the area as we go through the early part of the morning tomorrow into Thursday, and then through the day when it's more focused now on Arizona with some snow in the upper elevations in the northern part of the state, with perhaps some rain showers getting in to some of the southern areas before pushing off and out of the area here as we go through the day on Friday. Now, as we go beyond that, there's some light snow showers here lingering across the Intermountain West. We do finally get a break, certainly for California, but even the West region as a whole as we go into the weekend here. I think we stay pretty quiet through Sunday. Could see something of a quick hitting system here through parts of the Pacific Northwest. Not really too much on the radar, so to speak, until midweek next week. We could see something of a system here for parts of the Pacific Northwest, Willamette Valley, Oregon. So we get something of a break here for folks who have just been deluged with some of the water and rainfall over the last weekend here. Another way to visualize that, just looking at the 7-day precipitation anomalies from the ECMWF model, this running all the way out to early Thursday of next week. So you can see the lower precipitation values here for California, parts of Washington, the Intermountain West, some of this that you're seeing here in Arizona. That's just in that 48-hour forecast that we just looked at. So getting this nice break here and to help with cleanup efforts across parts of Southern California. Mentioned that cold temperature situation in California with the system kind of bringing a cold front down through the area. I'll start this as of tomorrow morning. This is the low temperature forecast for Thursday morning. You can see those lows starting to get a little chilly here in parts of the Central Valley, down to 35 in the northern Sacramento Valley, down into the 40s in the lower Colorado River Valley. As we get through February, the blossoms start in the Central Valley and other areas. That frost becomes a more heightened concern. Friday, temperatures still cool, dropping now maybe into the mid-30s in parts of the Central Valley, down into the lower 40s, if not high 30s, across southern Arizona, the lower Colorado River Valley. Now Saturday morning, February 10th, looking at lows again in the mid-30s around the Central Valley, upper 30s, low 40s, and a similar situation on Sunday morning before warming up on Monday and Tuesday, just a tad here for some of these areas. Not necessarily reaching that concerning frost point right down to 34, 33, 32 degrees. Certainly not into hard freeze territory at all, but temperatures trying to get down a little bit closer. Some of those kind of frosts can sneak up on you where the forecast might stay at 35 2 or 3 days out. As you get closer to it, it can trend down to 32 or 31, and suddenly you're under a frost warning. So just something to keep an eye on here as we go into the final dates of this week and then into this weekend. If we look at the 5-day temperature anomaly, even out into next week, we can see this kind of colder regime setting up across Southern California, parts of Southern Nevada, Utah, and Arizona as well. So not a huge break in the cold weather as we get out into next week, talking maybe February 11th out through February 16th, Sunday through Thursday there. Could see something of a warm up if we extend a little bit beyond that toward next weekend. To get an idea where we're going after that, we'll just look at the upper level height map here from the ECMWF ensemble. Right now under the definitely under the domination of this upper level trough here centered over California. That's bringing that cold weather in that we just talked about, helping to usher that system through the area and then into Arizona. If I play this forward out into the future, out into Friday, Saturday, now Sunday into the weekend, that low pressure system, or that upper level trough, I should say, extending out east of the divide. We get this weak ridging over parts of the northwest. That's going to bring in a little bit warmer air into folks here in the northwest. Not the strongest ridge, which is why we're keeping the temperatures a little bit cooler here across Southern California, Arizona, and Nevada. As we go out into next weekend, though, the kind of big focus is now shifting onto what's happening at the Pacific. That's where maybe our eyes are drawn. This big dominant upper level trough out in the northern Pacific, and that's likely, if forecast holds, going to set up some sort of Pacific jet extension event going into the next kind of late work week. And that's really going to be the focus, not only of the last part of this video here, but our focus going forward, just because that would necessarily kind of put on our radar the possibility of another Pacific jet extension, atmospheric river event, potentially something coming through the state of California yet again near the end of next week. Another way we can visualize this is just looking at the same forecast here, ECMWF ensemble, but showing us the upper level jet stream there. What kind of Pacific jet extension are we talking about? Well, if I take this forecast through the weekend here, now out into Monday, February 12th, Tuesday the 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th, you can see that kind of textbook just north of Hawaii, Pacific jet extension pointed right at folks here in Southern California, bringing the potential for atmospheric river events. Now I'm going to pause there, because we're talking well out into the forecast here. A 7-day forecast would take us into right next Wednesday afternoon. I'm recording this video here Wednesday afternoon of this week. This is really looking more of something like a 9 to 10-day forecast. We can't say anything too definitively. It's possible the models are being premature here. It won't be a big atmospheric river event, but at least right now the ECMWF ENS or ensemble is calling for that sort of forecast. If we look at the Madden-Julian oscillation, it has been over here in the Pacific Ocean for the last number of days, likely playing a role in the last Pacific jet extension event that we saw. And the forecast right now, the kind of red, blue, and then into the purple, taking us through kind of the third week of February. No movement from the MJO. Something of a stalling pattern here in the Pacific. We've talked about this before, that when that MJO gets into the Pacific, it tends to increase the chance of these Pacific jet extension events. That increases the chance for these low pressure systems coming through, just like we're seeing today, like we saw this past weekend, and the potential also for those atmospheric river events that often come with these for the West Coast. So this is kind of, stars are aligning here for potential concern getting out into the end of next week here. Climate Prediction Center, the 8 to 14-day forecast here, they're seeing these things as well. I would imagine much above average precipitation outlook now for parts of California, Southern California, the coastline. This would probably include the Sierra Nevadas, parts of the lower Colorado River Valley, all forecasting right now the chance for above average precipitation across the west and southwest coastline. If you look at the GFS, just kind of a different opinion here from their ensemble model. Boy, it looks pretty similar looking from the GFS now. You see that extension of the Pacific jet stream, maybe a little bit of a southern shift there in that jet stream, but nonetheless heightening the chance that we're talking, not necessarily the same potency of event that we saw Sunday into Monday, right? Not calling for catastrophic flooding like anything that we just saw, but the chance is there. So, it's something that we'll keep an eye on, that we're ready for with some of these forecast signals aligning near the end of next week. Climate Prediction Center, as a result, has released a moderate risk for heavy precipitation out into the end of next work week. So this is February 15th out through the 21st. Again, talking kind of that third week of February. You'd imagine with any sort of system like that, we'd be getting bountiful snowfall up in the Sierra Nevadas, perhaps the upper Colorado River Basin. And that is the case here with a moderate risk for heavy snow from the Climate Prediction Center, and the Sierras moderate, and then slight risk for heavy snowfall across northern Arizona, parts of Colorado and Utah there as well. I want to talk long-term just quickly here. The ECMWF seasonal forecast just came out here the last few days. This is looking really spring of 24. Getting a lot of questions now. Because we're in an El Nino, we've seen this wet pattern deliver here, certainly for parts of California and some other areas. Are we going to see a repeat of the 23 spring where we got a lot of rain, got a lot of snowfall in the Sierra Nevadas? It improved the hydrology. The reservoir situation improved, but I had some struggles early in the year with field operations. We saw a cool start to the year that affected pollination, and then just, again, struggling to get into the fields with some of the wet conditions in parts of California and the Willamette Valley. The forecast right now, this just from the ECMWF, a little bit wetter here for the West Coast. Not the biggest rainfall signal that you'll ever see. Maybe something akin to what it's forecasting for the Southeast. We're seeing much higher rainfall signals there for that spring forecast. But it is a little bit on the wet side, so something to watch here that the ECMWF is leaning that way. We're in an El Nino now. El Nino winters tend to, on average, be a bit wetter across the West Coast. The question is that going to continue even into March and April when that water, or that fire hose of Pacific moisture finally starts to wane? Well, one thought experiment that my colleague Eric Snodgrass did is he went back and found all the El Nino years where we faded quickly out of El Nino going into the summer months. Now, that's a pretty typical evolution. It's a fairly predictable scenario that El Nino follows every year, that it weakens going into the new year. Well, what did the precipitation look like, particularly in spring for those years? Is it something that we're somehow going to have a repeat of the rained out 23 spring? And we got this map here. This is looking at the last number of El Nino years. You can see some really big years in here, 1983 included. We also had a very strong El Nino in 2016 that didn't deliver a ton of precipitation, at least in winter for parts of California. And the 2019 one as well, which was quite a bit weaker, but did get us more rainfall and snowfall in the Sierras. When we plug all this in and say, well, what were those spring like, May, April, and March in terms of precipitation anomalies? And there is something of a light signal for increased rainfall here. You can see that along the coastal areas, more so for parts of Northern California, perhaps the Sacramento Valley. But we do have this increased wet signal here for parts of California, Southern Oregon. Curiously here, a little bit of a dry signal in parts of the Pacific Northwest. Some of the forecasts catching in on this now from the Climate Prediction Center as well, that the spring could be drier for folks in the Pacific Northwest or perhaps northern Idaho and northwest Montana. So not calling, again, for a huge deluge here coming through the spring, March to April. We're not going to be able to get in the fields again. We are just a bit on the wet side, at least looking to the past as a guide. And then that ECMWF forecast going forward, also a little bit on the wet side. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be rained out every single week, right? We just learned that, it can be dry for a number of weeks and then get quite a bit of water all at once in one weekend. But it's something we're keeping an eye on now going into the forecast. That's all I have for y'all here this week. Stay tuned. I'll talk to y'all next week. Thanks for watching.